Niklas Gustafson, thank you so much for coming on the Dr. Tyna Show today. I had the honor of being on your podcast recently and I had so much fun. I wanted to bring you on my show. So thank you for making the time today.
Thank you, Tina, so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Tell the audience a bit about yourself because I found you randomly on Instagram and your Instagram page is so great. Your YouTube is great. You're really a wealth of knowledge, whether you know it or not. You have taught me a lot about cooking and nutrition, and you live in Europe, and it's just fascinating. So introduce yourself for the audience.
Thank you so much for your kind words. I'm Swedish. I moved to Spain like 25 years ago. Well, how should I describe myself? I'm an entrepreneur. I started my own company when I was like 20 years old, and that same company I started in Spain when I was a bit older. And since I was a child, I've been gluten intolerant. So people ask me where I got my passion for food. Where does that come from? And honestly, I think, but I'm not sure, but I think that it came from me being a child not being able to eat what all the other kids ate. So I started to like experiment with my both grandmothers actually. They helped me to do my own bread, to bake my own bread, and we used all kinds of, buckwheat and dates and all kinds of stuff without gluten. So I think that that's where it started, where it all
That's
started. And, yeah.
that's fascinating. Your grandma, both your grandmothers taught you to
Yeah,
cook. You
yeah.
got to cook
And
with
it was
them.
and it was actually very interesting because my grandmother from my mother's side, she traveled a lot because my mother's father, he was in banking. So they were in Hong Kong, they were in Beirut, they were all over the world and even South America and Latin America. So she brought home all kinds of different exotic recipes. While my other grandmother, she was very local from the south of Sweden. So she cooked like typical Swedish recipes from the south, from southern Sweden. So they were like very different in their way of cooking. And that also opened up like a new world to me that, wow, you can cook so differently. And I was like 5, 6, 7 years old when I started cooking with them.
Oh, that warms my heart. I didn't get to ever really spend much time with my grandma or either of them, and I can imagine the legacy that that's passed on to you. Those are wonderful recipes and memories that
Yeah,
when our loved ones leave the planet, their recipes go with them often. So that's
totally.
great that you can
Yeah,
carry that
yeah.
forward.
Yeah, and she actually, so my grandmother, one of my grandmothers, she felt like, well, Nicholas, he cannot not eat that, and he cannot eat hamburgers from the US. So I remember she made these huge hamburgers, American style, because in the 70s, that was like the hottest recipes, the hottest, like the new trend, what was trending. So that was, yeah, it was amazing. It was really good memories. Unfortunately, none of them are alive, but they were actually my grandmother. One of them was 91 when she passed away. So yeah, she lived a healthy life.
That's
She
yeah,
was
you
very much into eating healthy, I mean, natural food. She very much appreciated the quality of natural ingredients.
do you think that that inspired you to get into just the natural health world? Like, because that's the thing. When I found you on Instagram,
Mm.
I, you know a lot about a lot of things. And I was like, how does this guy know all this stuff? Is this all self-taught? Was this something that you were interested in your whole life? Like, what was that journey like for you?
Yeah, I think to be honest that my knowledge is not that deep, but I know a lot about. I know I'm quite broad as I don't think if that's the word in American in English. So I do know a little bit about a lots of different things. And when it comes to natural food, that is something that I think that I got from childhood, not just from my grandmothers, but also from my parents. They were also into, especially my mother, into like eating as natural as you could. We were in my house in my home, we were Coca-Cola was completely forbidden, for example. We couldn't drink that, which I very much appreciate today. But that at that time, when you're like 8 years old, you don't really realize why. And I've
Absolutely.
tried to explain that. Yeah.
My best friend, I told you off the air, my best friend that we're still best friends. We've been best friends for almost 40 years, and she's Swedish, and her parents would not allow any junk food in the house at all. If we had soda, it was like natural soda at her house, and my house was the junk food house. It was all processed foods and junk food. And I don't want to throw my mom under the bus because my mom made delicious dinners, but really there was just a lot of processed foods. Like the vegetables that we ate were from the freezer. It wasn't the way that I eat today by any means. And my best friend had to eat all the healthy, clean food because her Swedish parents were that way. And she was adopted, but her parents were very much into health. And she'd come to my house to eat the junk food like that. I was the house everybody
Really?
came to eat all the, much to my mother's dismay because she had to pay for all of it. But it's funny because my best friend actually swung the other way in high school and really started eating predominantly fast food.
Really?
And her health
And you went the other way.
I went the exact opposite. Yep. I started hanging out with her parents and asking them what they were doing. And because I still to this day am not very much of a cook. That's why I'm fascinated by your Instagram page, by the way, because I am a terrible cook. I don't really enjoy it. I'm trying to learn to like it and I still can't quite get it. But anyway, yeah, we both went. But now she's a mother of three. Everything's home cooked. She
Oh, yeah.
bakes her own sourdough bread.
She went
What
she went back eventually.
she
Yeah.
came around. Well, you can't live that way for very long. It doesn't pan out well.
And especially when you have kids at home, you want them to start their life as natural and healthy as they can.
Absolutely. I got to say, beauty is a big part of it. If you want to maintain your beauty or get it back, the only way to do that really is through good eating. I mean,
Totally.
that's the ticket. So, speaking of which, would you share your age with the audience? I don't think people would believe you're as old as you are,
Okay, I'm 54.
right? When you told me that, I was like, "What? What is
Yeah.
what is your secrets besides
Well,
all these delicious whole foods?"
I've always done a lot of sports, and I've always loved to be like active. And so I did a lot of marathons, Ironmans. I don't think, by the way, that kind of endurance training keeps you that young, to be honest. I don't think so. And actually, a couple of years ago, I changed my way of training. So now I do more weightlifting and less endurance training. I play tennis, but I think also that the last 5, 6 years I've taken my sleep more seriously, because before that my sleep was really, I slept too little. I
Mm,
did everything wrong. I had an interview, a podcast interview with a sleep expert, and I realized like 5, 6, 7 years ago that I did everything wrong. I had like screens until very late. I ate dinner too late, which is quite normal in Spain. I worked out too late. I did everything wrong. So with my Aura Ring, I started to track my sleep, and I realized that, wow, I need to change basically everything in my life. So, which I did. And I think that, coming back to your question, answering your question, I think that to be able to not grow old too early in life, I think sleep is very, very, very important. So yeah,
it's critical.
nutrition, workout, sleep, those are important things. But I also believe that being outside in the sunshine is very important. I've always loved the sun for some reason. My mother tells me that since I was a child, I just loved being out in the sun. And that is probably one of the reasons I moved to Spain, because Sweden is a very dark country in wintertime. It's very, very dark. So being to live in Madrid, we have sun like 7 days out of 8. The sun is shining. So I think that the sun not only gives you the vitamin and all these benefits, but also makes you happy. It makes you smile.
Yes, it's critical. I have been interviewing a lot of light experts lately and really deep diving. I've always been a fan of the sun in particular, but I didn't understand light the way that I understand it now. And I realized that living in Oregon, I have a severe light deficiency. And I think that a lot of my health issues stem from that, and that
Mm.
just living in the sun during the winter would probably remedy 9 out of 10 issues that I have struggled with. And that's the one thing I've noticed about you. You always have a tan, like you're tan year round. And I can tell you go outside a lot. And
Yeah,
who wouldn't if you live in a beautiful place? So I think you're onto something there because, and going back to your training, that probably puts you outside a lot too. All that training for
totally.
marathons is a lot of outside time. And my friends that did marathons, the ones that trained outside actually were far more robust than the ones who trained on a treadmill. And
right?
it's not just, I mean, yeah, the mechanics of a treadmill are going to be different and there's going to be different forces on your knees and your hips. Of course, I don't favor treadmills by any means. Being outside's better, but just being outside, like so
Yeah.
therapeutic in general.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. But honestly, I did a lot of treadmill running in my days. But I mean, being outside is like, I just love being outside. All kinds of outdoor activities. And also to be outside with my kids. I think that's important because the kids need to be outside. Otherwise, they're with their iPad or with a iPhone all day. That's a constant struggle with my kids, the old ones and the young ones. I have 5 kids, by the way.
I can't
So
imagine trying to get 5 kids to stay off of technology. That's got to be
no,
that's an uphill
you know,
battle.
that's the toughest struggle by far. It's to get them off the screen. So we have like these time frames that, okay, now you have 20 minutes. You can watch, for example, our 3-year-old son, he loves Frozen, you know, with Disney. But he gets addicted immediately. And those the movies, they're made to be addictive. So that's really hard. That's why I think, like, you need to force them to get out. You must go out. That's
I,
that's
I I have a theory about Frozen. I was a Disney fanatic growing up.
yeah,
Like I was big into Disney and I could probably recite most of the Disney movies from our time growing up.
yeah,
And then that movie Frozen came out. My daughter was probably a little too old to really appreciate it. And so I sat down with her. We watched it once and we both were like, meh, it's okay. Like it's definitely not Disney's best work by any means. But people are so addicted to that movie in particular. And I was like, are they
I didn't
putting
know that.
some it's crazy. I know grown-ups that are addicted to that movie. They love it and kids watch it on repeat. And I'm wondering like did they put some subliminal messages in there? What is going on with that movie in
That's
particular? Because
interesting. I didn't know that. But our 3.5-year-old son, he is completely addicted to that movie. So I didn't know that you. But according to you, you say that it's more addictive than other Disney movies.
some of the other ones that I would say that The Little Mermaid was one that could go on repeat, but I think that's because it was so colorful and fun and the songs were really good. The Finding Nemo, I think same thing, but again, very colorful and fun. But of
Yeah,
all the Disney movies that I have seen kids go crazy for and want to watch over and over and over again,
yeah.
it's Frozen in particular.
Frozen.
And it's kind of a dark theme. Like it's not
Yeah,
actually the brightest or most colorful
totally.
movie. So
Yeah.
I don't know, not to be off topic. I'm like, what is going on with that movie? There's crack in it or something. I don't know. It's like Diet Coke. Why are people so addicted to Diet Coke, right? Like what are they putting in it that's making it
Yeah.
so particularly addictive? I don't know.
I never
Anyway,
drank light soda, so I have no idea. I never
so
liked the taste.
so your parents wouldn't let you have it and then you just never got into it on the side. Like when you were old enough to make your choices, you just never.
Okay, so when I was old enough to make my own choices, I did have sodas. I mean, not that much and not every day, but sodas, yeah. But I was saying was that I never had light sodas,
Oh, diet sodas.
diet sodas. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, me
That
neither. They're disgusting. I thought
they're
they tasted
disgusting. There is
terrible.
something about the taste. It doesn't taste natural, and so if I have a soda, it would be a normal soda.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was 14, I quit drinking soda. I don't know why. I just decided
Mm,
well, my grandfather had multiple sclerosis and every time I went over there, he had a soda by his table and I was like,
yeah,
he's
yeah.
dying of a neurologic disease. Should he be drinking this? And my grandmother fed him a lot of ultra processed foods and I kind of put two and two together. And then I had an aunt with type 2 diabetes who was totally addicted to Tab soda. Did you guys have Tab soda? It was like a diet soda
No,
and
I
the
haven't seen it in Europe, but I know what it is.
it's disgusting. And she was addicted to that. And between that, as a young child, I was like, and then I remember when NutraSweet and the artificial sweeteners came on the scene, and I
Yeah.
thought they tasted terrible. One good thing I did for myself I took terrible care of myself in my teenage years, but I quit drinking soda. So I got that going
Mhm.
for me.
Yeah.
So talk to me about you cook a lot with viscera, with organs, and you make foods that I like. You made these tacos with like heart the other day. I think it was liver or heart or something on your feed. And I was like,
Yeah.
where do you come up with these ideas?
You know, that is something that I have always loved experimenting in the kitchen. I know I opened the fridge or I opened the freezer and I just, what do we have here? Okay, so there's a beef liver or beef heart or whatever. And I just, or sweetbread. I love sweetbread. So I just tried, out of the ingredients that I love, which is like animal based and then fruits and berries, out of that, I try to just put something together. I don't see it as, and to be honest, I do fail a lot. And I remember when I was a kid, my mother was like, it was frustrating for her because she had to throw away so much of what I made because it turned out horrible. So, in the kitchen, I think it's a lot about the failing. And when you see the failures, you won't repeat that failure because you know it's going to be bad. So for the next time, you just do something a bit different and then it turns out a little bit better. And then after like 10 attempts, you get it right.
So you're kind of a chef in that way. I mean, that's basically, you're not cooking boring food. You're cooking really interesting things that I would never, they look delicious. And I'm like, what is the ingredients there? And then you explain it. And I'm like, what? How did he come up with that? I wondered though, have you always been cooking with viscera and organ meats, or was that something more recent? I know it's become more of a fad in the biohacking community to eat nose to tail, or was that
Yeah.
something you were doing as a child even?
Okay, so since I was a child, I did like exotic food. That is nothing. I mean, I had oysters, I had liver when I was a kid. Yeah, I did because my parents wanted me to try everything, and I tried everything, and I do the same with my kids. But to be honest, the recipes that I'm doing now with heart or with the liver or with sweetbread, that's something more recent. I didn't cook that much. I mean that those kind of ingredients before. So you're telling me that you were what you ate was like the worst when you were in your teens, right?
Yeah.
I my life is not such a big contrast, but I was like a sugar addict since, I mean, until I was 35 or so. And then something happened when I was 35, I think, because I met, well, a friend of mine, his sister was running a paleo restaurant in LA, in California. And he told me about this, and what is paleo? And I just became interested in paleo. So I started when I was 35, something, yes, 35, 37. I started to take out the sugar. That was the first step. And then I felt so much better. So I started to quit all kind of refined carbs like corn, rice, potato. I threw that away, and that was maybe I was 40s or something. So from that, I started experimenting. And then I had a couple of years when I was keto, everything keto. And then I went back to, so now I eat animal based with fruit, with berries, with a lot of eggs and raw dairy. I love raw dairy. It's not that easy to find, but once you get these suppliers, you know where where you can buy from. And then it's like quite easy. What were you asking? Yeah, if I always did cook with liver and bread. Well, so it's like the last few years, I would say 3 or 4 years, I focus more on animal based, and I do cook with what do you call it in English? Visceral,
Oh, viscera. That just means
viscera.
organs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
organ, exactly, organ meat. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, so you just
and
told
and
us.
also sorry, and
Okay.
also the recipes. I try also to make them more interesting. Combining, for example, I don't know if you saw. I did the other couple of weeks ago banana cakes
Yes.
with liver. And so those combinations, with banana and liver, people feel, well, how can you even think about combining banana and liver? But actually, they turned out delicious. And my wife wants me to repeat that recipe at least once a week.
That's
And
why I
even
was,
my
that's,
kids like that.
they ate it. Yeah, I was going to ask you, do your kids enjoy the way you cook? Because that's what I'm saying. Like, how does he come up with this stuff? Like, who in the world would have thought to put liver with
Yeah.
banana? You just have these epiphanies and it works. It's awesome
Yeah,
because
but
you,
honestly, I mean, they don't like everything I do. Liver, for example, liver is hard to kids. Kids don't like liver, at
yeah.
least not my kids.
Is there a way to sneak it in? I've had friends tell me that you could have your beef ground down and you could have the organ meat ground into it, and that's one way to sneak it
Totally.
in.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I do my own. When I make my ground, I do mix. So I have usually I put like 10 or 15% of liver into my ground meat. That's a great way to make it. They don't feel that, and actually I think it's the taste is even more juicy or more like intense. I love it.
Okay, that's a good hack. So you grind your own meat then. You don't do you have the
Yeah.
butcher do it or you do it yourself?
No, I do it myself. I bought this what do you call it? Meat grinder on Amazon. Actually, it was 350 euros, I think, which is a great investment.
Oh, that's a great idea.
It is a great idea because all those parts of the animal that are less expensive, when you grind them, it doesn't really matter. They turn out amazing. So it is a very good investment. Everybody should have one at home.
That's a great idea. Plus the cartilage and all of the parts of the animal that we need for health.
Exactly.
We need to get the collagen. We don't eat that so much when we're just eating muscle meat. So ground meat is my preference always because I know I'm getting the things I wouldn't eat otherwise. I don't like gristly
Exactly.
meat. I don't want to eat the chunkers on the end of the bone like my husband does. He's like an animal. He doesn't care. But I'm very picky. But if it's ground in, I don't notice, and I get the things I
Exactly.
need.
No, no, I'm like your husband. I love those part of the animal, but I know that the rest of my family they don't. So to put everything inside that machine and it comes out ground meat and it's like all mixed. That's very good. And actually, it's so easy to put a lot of the fatty parts and the fatty parts. You mix them and when you make those hamburgers, that wow, they're so juicy.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, that's brilliant. Last year we purchased half of a grass-fed cow.
Mm,
And the year prior, the one that we got was a bit chewy and I just didn't like it. It wasn't that yummy. And it actually ended up with a whole cow that year. So for a year, I ate off this cow. I did not like it very much. And so
yeah,
the next year, the cow, I said, just grind everything up. Like we just kept the
yeah.
cuts of meat that I like, which I'm kind of bougie. I like the filet mignon and I like the fancier cuts. And then we kept the roasts and we turned everything else into ground beef. And it was perfect. And it was the most delicious ground beef ever because it was some more premium cuts and then some lesser premium cuts. And it
Yeah.
all turned out amazing. So I think
It
that's
is
a great
that I
idea.
agree with you. I agree because the grass-fed meat is less fatty and more chewy. So it's you need to know how to cook it and to make a ground meat of that. I think that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah. How do you prefer to cook the grass-fed beef? Do you just do it really slow and low? What's your secrets?
Yes, I love to do, for example, the ribs. I love to make them in the oven for like at least 24 hours. They can go more. And at the end it gets like really, really tender. And
Wow.
and also I like the roast beef, grass-fed. Also, I put it at a low temperature. Okay, so in Fahrenheit, I don't know, but it's in Celsius, it's like 54 degrees, 53, 54. Then it gets really like what do you call it? Like pink, red. It's like rare, almost rare. So I put it there like in the oven for 24 hours. And then the last like 15 minutes, I put it on the wok pan with tallow because then you get like a really nice crust.
Oh, yum.
And then I slice it in this machine. It's easier to get really thin slices in the machine.
You cook it, and then while it's still whole, you put it in the wok and
Exactly.
tallow to crust
Exactly.
up oh, that sounds delicious. And then you
Yeah,
have your own meat slicer.
exactly. Also, a really good investment.
I was gonna say, I need to come to your house.
I already invited you. You should come to Spain.
If I come to Spain, I promise I will. You've also got a very cool setup, like sauna cold plunge setup. That's correct? You've told me about it, and
Yeah,
I've seen
that's
it on your
that's something
Instagram.
that is something recent in my life. I had it for a couple of years now, but it is addictive. I mean, because I've been told that you get, if you do like, so my way of doing it is like 1 hour altogether. So I do like 15, 16 minutes in the sauna, and then I'd go into the cold plunge, and then in the sauna again, and the cold plunge, and I end with the sauna because this is usually what I do in the evenings. So it's nice to be not too cold when you finish. But I mean, so I just love the contrast between the sauna and the cold plunge. I like to have it. Again, in Fahrenheit, I don't know, but it's like 104 degrees or something like that. It's quite a lot. And then the cold plunge is like 5 degrees or 6 degrees. And the contrast there is just amazing. And also what I did was when I installed this sauna, it's a combination between normal Swedish Finnish sauna and this infrared sauna. So I have both. To be honest, I don't really notice the infrared benefits from the infrared, but I've heard it's supposed to be amazing.
It just penetrates deeper. So you're probably, I mean, I don't feel much different sweating in an infrared sauna than I do sweating in a dry sauna. But at the end of the day, it supposedly is penetrating several inches deeper into the tissue. So
Right? Yeah, I heard so. But do you do only infrared?
I have a couple different saunas. I have a far infrared sauna box that I,
Yeah,
walk into sauna. And
yeah.
then I have a sauna by sunlight, or a sauna by sauna space. It is the tent. It's a beautiful handcrafted unit, and it's this beautiful
I've seen it. Yeah.
hand dyed. Yeah, it's gorgeous, but it has these red bulbs and they're intense. They get hot fast. So I get in there, I start sweating very quickly. Plus, I get a ton of light, and
Mm,
it's full spectrum with a big hit of near infrared light. And that saved me this winter. That was really
yeah.
profound because I went to Hawaii in the beginning of February for my 50th birthday. I went to Hawaii, and I made sure that our condo that we were staying at, the balcony faced east so that we would have the sun rise on us on the balcony, because all I wanted to do was sit in the sun and drink my coffee in the morning. Like that was my only goal, was to sit every morning in the sun and drink my coffee and see how I felt. And it was so profound. By like day 5, my husband was a different human. I mean, it was just such a great feeling. And when we came home to rain, 40 degrees, just it's so gray here, Nicholas. It's like I can't explain it to people.
It's
They
like
don't.
Sweden. I know.
Yeah, yeah, you understand. It's so
Yeah,
gray. It's gray all
yeah,
day. I don't even know what time of day it is sometimes. It's so gray.
yeah.
And we came home to that weather, and I immediately bought that sauna space unit because I was like, I need light.
Yeah.
That's it. That confirmed for me that I really have a light deficiency. So, and I do sauna similarly to you though. That's a very European traditional naturopathic way of doing
Yeah.
contrast, hot
Yeah,
and cold.
especially in Northern Europe, Sweden and Finland.
Yep.
Uh, those wooden saunas with, yeah, but they're dry. But then if you go to, like to Turkey, you get the more the hammam, the steam
Hmm.
sauna, which is really nice as well. But the one that I have is like the typical Swedish, Finnish wood sauna,
Yeah.
which I must say that this is something that I love. I love to go there with a nice podcast or ebook and to be like in a bubble.
Yes. It's definitely just that, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? When you don't have any, when you're in isolation and you don't have
Yeah,
any, sensory deprivation. It's like a sensory deprivation experience when I go in the sauna as well. And it's my little tomb, my little cocoon
right.
of warmth. I
And
will
what
add,
makes it so addictive, I mean, it's very nice to be there in your bubble, but also I heard that the dopamine rush that you get, it's tough dopamine rush, right?
right. No, absolutely. It's a great thing to do. Do you do that every single night, or is that just a couple times a week?
You know, when I'm at home, when I'm not out traveling, I do it like 5 times a week. So almost every day, every evening. Sometimes with my wife and sometimes alone.
I bet that's a big part of your secret of longevity, because when I'm sauning regularly, my skin looks amazing. Everything looks amazing if I
Yeah.
really stay on it. And then if you add that contrast in there, I don't prefer as cold of a contrast. I just don't have the vitality. I definitely keep my water closer to 60 degrees if I can, because I can't Fahrenheit. I can't do cold. It's too much
Yeah.
of a shock to my system. But
Even after you've been in the sauna, you think it's too cold?
I will do more of a traditional naturopathic hydrotherapy technique if it's really cold, where I just plunge my arms and legs in. I
Yeah.
won't submerge my core. And
Okay.
the logic behind that is that we're driving circulation. So when you get hot, you vasodilate. When you get in the cold, you vasoconstrict.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a tip. You always want to end with cold, because you want to push the blood back to the center. So perhaps, since you don't want to obviously cool down your entire body since you just got warm and you're going to bed. Try just putting your arms up to, here, and your legs, even if you just took a wet washcloth,
Okay. Yeah.
that out of the cold, and just stroked your arms and legs just to get that blood circulation back to your core. You don't want
Okay.
it pooling out in your extremities. And the sauna will have you pooling it.
I'll try it. I'll try that.
Yeah,
I just
that's
love to be hot at the end. But
the,
yeah.
yeah, I do too. I get it. I have a hard time when I take my shower at night because I always want to end with cold, but sometimes it's just too damn cold and I want to go to bed warm and toasty.
Yeah.
So, but in naturopathic hydrotherapy, it's always rounds of 3. So it's hot. Well, I'll do about 20 minutes. I don't know, 10, 15, 20 minutes of in the sauna. And then I'll do actually very short duration cold. So like 60 seconds short.
Okay.
I don't sit in there for
Yeah.
minutes. There is some impact to going longer, but I'm really just trying to stoke my vitality.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not trying to break any records. And then I'll rest, and I will go back into the sauna, cold, rest. And it takes me about an hour, but you always want to end with just a little bit of a cold stimuli
You end with
somehow
cold.
to bring
Yeah.
it back.
I see. You end with cold. Okay. I'll try
Yeah,
that.
that's the
Yeah.
ticket. It helps the gut too, which I think helps, those of us who have, I've never been diagnosed celiac, but I'm definitely severely gluten intolerant. How did you find out that you had celiac? What's the story behind that?
I was only like 8 or 9 months old. That was when I didn't breastfeed anymore. So
Oh,
when I started with formula, so I was really really small, and I was about to die because I was totally undernourished. Is that the way you say? Yeah,
mhm.
I was like weeks away from dying. So I was very like sensitive to gluten. I mean, nobody benefits from gluten, but I was very like sensitive. But I
Wow.
noticed that what growing older and staying away from gluten, then you build up a certain resistance. So a couple of weeks ago, by accident, one of my sons, he made a ramen. You know the ramen,
Mm-hmm.
Asian ramen. And he thought he was making it with gluten-free noodles, but they were wheat noodles. So I
Oh
had
no.
them, and then after having them, I realized that I shouldn't have had those noodles, and I almost felt nothing. The day after, there was like a childhood memory when I felt my stomach hurt a little bit, but it was not that bad. But if you stay away from gluten, when you're gluten intolerant, then you build up a resistance, and you can actually handle one serving of gluten without pain.
I've experienced similar. As long as I keep myself healthy and my gut healthy and my stress low, if I eat some gluten, I don't die. I used to, when I was even a couple years ago, when my stress was at its height,
Yeah,
a little bit of gluten just took me down, and it
yeah,
was terrible. And I also had a bit of, we call it failure to thrive in
yeah,
infants when
yeah,
you know, they're not adding weight the way that they should be. I was that kid, and I was a very sickly little kid growing up, and I always had stomach aches. I always had stomach aches. I remember we would have pizza at school as a special occasion. They'd have pizza day,
yeah,
and the feeling of dread when I look at a pizza, I
yeah,
immediately feel dread because
yeah,
I'm so familiar with that terrible stomach ache that it gives me.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's really a miserable experience. My husband didn't believe me when we met. And then I accidentally got glutened at a restaurant, and I went home and had the worst night ever. And he was like, wow, that's real. That's
And,
really,
and since when don't you eat any gluten at all?
I can do sourdough if it's a high quality, simple sourdough that's just a few
Hmm.
ingredients made the way it's
Yeah.
supposed to. I can actually, one of the peptides I use, BPC 157, it comes in an oral version and a
Okay.
pill. And I don't know if you've used that, but BPC 157 does a phenomenal job of
Really?
regenerating tissue, but it really regenerates the gut lining, is what I found. It used to be available injectable in the United States, but the FDA took it away, but we can get it orally still. And so I just stay on I cycle it. So I'll take it for a time and then go off of it for a time. But I found as long as I have that on board, my gut lining tends to stay pretty well healed. And then gluten doesn't destroy me so badly. So if I'm traveling, I might have a bite or two, but it's got to be worth it. Like it's got
Yeah.
to be something
Right.
really, really good. And
Right.
otherwise, I'll just spit it out. I'll just spit it in my napkin, like not
Yeah.
worth the gluten.
Right.
So I'm pretty strict. I'm not as strict as I used to be, but I think that's because I can tolerate it a bit better, but I start to notice that I look bad. If I eat gluten too often or if it gets near me, my skin gets weird. I start looking wrinkly. It's like it ages me overnight almost.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it does. It does.
yeah,
Yeah.
I avoid
And I
it.
mean, I have friends that they discovered they were gluten intolerant when they were almost 50, like 40, 45. It's amazing. They've been eating gluten all their lives while they shouldn't. I
Yep.
think people should be more like um, realizing that is toxin and nobody really benefits from.
Most of the time, I don't know if you're aware of this, but they did a study. I don't know exactly how it went, but some researchers in the United States found a freezer. It was in a military base. They found a freezer of tissue samples of folks who had celiac disease. I think it was probably intestinal biopsies. So little
Yeah,
chunks of their guts were
yeah,
cut out and put in deep freeze, and they were there and they were viable still. And they found these people. They followed up with them, and this is decades later. And they put it all together in a study. And what they found was that 7 out of 8 people actually had neurologic symptoms or were dead. And
really.
only 1 out of 8 had gastrointestinal symptoms,
Mm.
meaning, and these were all diagnosed celiac patients.
Yeah,
So that means that most of us are having our nervous system attacked, our nerves, our brain, and all of
true.
our nervous tissue. And 7 out of 8 people are not even having gastrointestinal issues or stomach aches. So they
That's it.
don't know. And people
Yeah,
always think, oh, gluten, stomach ache. That's not it. Like there's a lot more to this. And it causes ataxia, which is where you're imbalanced and you can't walk straight.
mm,
My grandfather, I said, died of multiple sclerosis. I wonder if he didn't also have a severe celiac gluten issue. I know my mother does. I know my grandmother did, but it doesn't have to be the severe diagnosable celiac to
no,
have an immune response that's really devastating on your body to gluten.
totally, totally. And I mean, so gluten is one anti-nutrient, but there are many. And the other day, I made an interview with Sally K. Norton. Do you know who
Yeah.
she is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and she was, she was talking about oxalates. I think that more people should actually know about oxalates and why spinach and raspberries are not that healthy. So, I mean, if you bombard your body with gluten and with oxalates and all kinds of anti-nutrients, you will get very weak after years. And most people, they do this for many, many, many years. So when they're up in their 40s or in their 50s, you start to realize that my health is not what it should be. So I think that that's why the vegan boom is so dangerous, and so I think it's a tragedy, that being financed and being supported by the food industry. That's so sad to see. And also that's why, to be honest, I do what I do on my Instagram, because I want people to discover that there are alternatives. If you
Hmm.
don't want to eat all this crappy food that is being offered by the food industry, there are so many alternatives that you can make at home.
Well, and to add to that, I'm not a big fan of vegetables, as you know. I do eat some, but not a ton. And I'll explain how I eat them in a second and why. But they are so heavily sprayed and full of toxins. Even if you're eating organic, the fields get cut. I live out in the country and I see this monocropping that people
Yeah,
do. And trust me, all that glyphosate blows in the wind all over the place. There's a organic dairy across the street. And they have signs all around that say no spraying, but everyone else around here sprays glyphosate like it's water. So
yeah,
it's getting into the cows over there, you
of
know?
course, of
There's no
course.
like magic barrier that keeps it out.
Yeah,
And I recently ran my glyphosate levels in my urine, and for as much glyphosate that I am exposed to out here, the trucks come out the field behind me with the big booms, and just the spray starts coming out, and I freak out and run in the house and get all the dogs inside. But as much as glyphosate I thought was going to kill me, my glyphosate levels were extremely low. And all of my
yeah,
colleagues were shocked. And I was like, that's because I don't eat any vegetables or grains.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not, grains are so heavily sprayed. People don't understand.
yeah.
Are you aware of how they are treated and desiccated before they are uh, harvested? Glyphosate is supposed to be sprayed on something to it's supposed to be sprayed when the crop is young or in the ground still. It's not supposed to be sprayed on like a fully grown crop that's about to be harvested for food, but it's a desiccant, meaning it dries out the wheat. So it's
Yeah.
sprayed on wheat right before they harvest it. They
Oh, really?
spray the crap, and I've seen it repeatedly in the wheat field behind me. They spray it early. They spray it between crop rotations, so the ground is just full of it. And then they spray it right before they harvest it and cut it all down to dry it out because it dries faster so it won't mold because it has to sit on the ground for a few days to dry before they
Oh,
can
yeah.
pick it up.
Okay.
So it's directly sprayed and then eaten. Like that,
Yeah,
it's
it's horrible.
it's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, it's crazy. I didn't know you could get your glyphosate levels measured, but that's I'll see if I can get them measured as well. And hopefully they're gonna be low as yours because I haven't eaten grains for many years. And when I was younger, I actually did eat oatmeal for breakfast, but I haven't done that the last 16, 17 years. But yeah, oat is actually something that is they spray a lot with glyphosate.
Yes, people don't realize that it's not just the grains that we're concerned about. I mean, the lectins, the anti-nutrients, like you mentioned, the immunologic response that can happen, but on top of it, it's just the damn glyphosate load on these things that people
Crazy.
are bathing in without even noticing it. And there's glyphosate in our tampons. There's glyphosate in anything that's cotton, if it's not organic. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And where I live is also wine country. So the grapes are
Oh,
so
yeah.
heavily sprayed. I ask every single winemaker I know, because I know a lot of them now. And I'm like, do you spray your grapes? And they're like, yeah, everybody sprays the hell out of their grapes. So it's just crazy how much we're being exposed to it and how
It is.
unaware people are.
Yeah, exactly. People are really unaware. And talking about wine, people have no idea that there are so many additives in wine. In Europe, at least, the food industry, you need to declare all additives, all ingredients, all additives. But when it comes to winemaking, they don't need to declare anything. They're
Really?
on the bottles on the wine, it doesn't say,
Yes,
and
that's
and
true.
still and still most wines have like I think between 50 and 70 different ingredients. Most of them are additives. And organic wines, they have like 25, 30
Hmm.
additives that are like okay, but I mean still people are really unaware of this. And so they have no idea. They think they're drinking like fermented grapes, but it's much more than that.
It is. It is. And they spray the hell out of them it's crazy how many times they spray the grapes too before they get harvested and turned into wine. And then they add a ton of sugar during the ferment, which fermenting should take some of it off, but it still ends up,
Yeah.
it's a
I,
lot.
I don't know if I told you, but I stopped drinking alcohol completely 2 years ago.
Good.
And when I did that, I must say that I don't understand how I could drink alcohol 52 years of my life. Well, not 52, but 32. 32 years since I was 20 years old, there was always a beer or a glass of wine. Or once I get the alcohol out of my life, I just love it. Amazing.
Yeah.
I try to encourage my friends because some of my closest friends, they drink too much, way too much. And I just like, I try to encourage them to get off because they do take like as we say here, white week. I don't know if you say the same in the US. White week means that there's no alcohol during a week. And I say, okay, but a week, it's not bad, but you should do it for 3 months because there's a threshold somewhere 3, 4 months. From that point, you don't crave any alcohol anymore. It's like you get almost like disgusted by alcohol.
It's true. I took a year off a couple years ago. I took a full year off alcohol and
Yeah.
it was remarkable. And I've brought it back in a little bit here and there. And every single time I drink, I feel so awful. I feel so awful the next day. And my brain doesn't do well. I have anxiety. I don't know.
What
I
do
don't
you
know
think?
why.
Why do you take that class?
I don't know. I seriously woke up the other day and I looked at my husband. I'm like, why did I just have 2 glasses of wine yesterday? I feel terrible. Like it
Yeah,
ruins everything. I'm definitely not at my best. I know it's just
yeah,
because I do love the taste of wine and I do love having a glass of wine with friends. That year was
yeah.
pretty antisocial for me. I felt pretty isolated and alone and I could
You know,
like
that's so
that part's
interesting
hard.
because, yeah, that's so interesting. The social part, because people, they ask me that, how can you stand the social pressure? If everyone at the table is having a glass of wine, having a beer, and how can you sit there having your sparkling water? And You know what I think? Because it doesn't bother me. And I think it is because when I was a child, I was so different, not having pizzas or those Swedish cinnamon rolls or all the kids had something else. And for me, when I was a child, I remember those they were tough years, really tough
Mhm.
years, because I couldn't have what the other children had. And when you're a child, that is something very hard. But at the same time, it made me like tough, because now that I'm 54 years old, why should I care if people have wine and I don't have wine? And they even tell me, come on, one glass is so it's okay. And I keep hearing that. People keep trying to get me to drink, but I don't.
It's amazing the pressure they'll put on you. And I don't succumb to the pressure. That part doesn't bother me because I'm a lot like you in that I've just always been the weird one out. And
Yeah,
I've always, when I was little, I couldn't drink dairy. So I had to drink soy milk, which was disgusting in the
yeah,
70s. And so it was my whole life was like no dairy. And I was that kid. I couldn't eat anything at the parties or anything else. I get it. It's amazing the pressure people will try to put on you.
yeah.
And
And not just alcohol, even like healthy food. Sometimes
mhm.
I feel that, yeah, why are you so healthy? Why can't you eat as everybody else? You know? And that social pressure, when I was a kid, yeah, it was tough, but not now.
Isn't it interesting that people will do that? Why? I wonder why that is. I mean, I have my ideas, but why do you think people will put so much pressure on somebody or shame them even for staying
Yeah,
healthy, fit, eating well? What is
yeah.
that?
Yeah, I honestly think that it has to do with themselves. They feel like I'm not doing the right thing, and then they try to blame you because they are not doing the right thing. But I think that they, of course, they would love to have a steak instead of a kilo of spinach and pasta, and
Yeah, who wouldn't, right?
who wouldn't? Yeah,
I don't want to eat spinach. It's gross and it has oxalates, like you said. It's
exactly.
Oh, I was going to mention, I did bring a little bit of vegetables back into my life. And here's why. I interviewed a gentleman named Joel Green. You should have him on your podcast. He was on my
Yeah,
podcast and he's brilliant. I love him. He's a self-taught fellow as well. He's just a genius. And he explains, he's written two books and I've read them and they blew my mind. And he explains, which is a basic concept of hormesis, which I think I talked about on your
yeah,
podcast a
yeah.
little bit.
We did. Yeah,
The oxalates and the anti-nutrients in the vegetables actually have a hormetic impact on our bodies. And so I think in reasonable doses, they can be quite healthful and
they can strengthen us, right?
yes, yes. So just that little bit of that stressor, but it's when
Yeah,
people just eat only that and they end up with tons of oxalate crystals in their joints and everywhere else, or
yeah,
like
yeah.
the lectins make their autoimmune disease go crazy. That's not what we want. But a little bit of vegetable here and there can have that hormetic hit.
When I had you on my podcast and you explained that to me, I it totally makes sense, and I think that's why I've always loved to use some herbs for, when I
Mm.
cook, like rosemary, like dill, basil leaves, all that. I've always cooked, even the years when I was like very hardcore keto carnivore. I still use herbs when I cook because I think I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense that some greens, some anti-nutrients from vegetables. I think it actually strengthens you.
It does.
But
And the
but you're right. It shouldn't be like this mountain of lentils or
right.
beans or spinach, or because it's way too much. We're not made. We're not designed to eat that the quant.
No, and my guts will tell me immediately. The next day I wake up and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, why did I eat all that salad?" Or why did I don't even touch beans, to be honest with you. Beans are there's so many lectins in beans and my
I
immune
agree.
system does not prefer them by any means. So,
Mm,
the way Joel explains it is that the saturated fat and the meat and the high protein and the high fat that we're consuming in a more animal-based diet has to be offset to some degree to have your appetite signaling hormones and your insulin sensitivity hormones all triggered correctly.
mm,
And plant foods are God's gift to us to do that. So
mm,
animal based as I would say I'm probably like 85% animal based and then a little bit of carbohydrate in here and then some vegetables because it triggers the right things to offset any of the damage Because
Yeah.
too much saturated fat, it's not about clogging your arteries. It actually can induce some insulin resistance and such. So it just gives you more balance. And so that's where I brought a little bit more in, but it's a dance. I have to be very careful with it. My stomach doesn't enjoy fiber very much. So it's like, what's the right threshold?
Yeah, and also when it comes to plant, I do prefer fruits and berries.
For sure.
Vegetables, very little. I mean, very
Right.
little. Yeah, herbs.
Yeah.
In my case, it's more herbs. Yeah,
I saw a great video. I'll have to send it to you if I find it again. It was a woman, she's like, name a vegetable for me. And people are raising their hands. And she's like, nope, that's a fruit. Nope, those are
exactly.
leaves. Nope, that's a flower. None of them
Yeah,
are, there's no such thing as a vegetable, was her argument.
yeah, yeah,
They're,
exactly.
they're either a
And,
fruit,
the
leaf, or flower.
yeah, and the thing is that when I say that I eat fruit and not vegetables, people don't realize that, tomatoes, eggplant, zucchini, they're all fruits, avocado, and I
Yep.
see that those are all fruits. Ah, okay. Well then, okay. So what is that you don't eat? Well, spinach, broccoli, etc., etc.
Yeah, me too. Same, same. I might have a little leafy greens here and there, but it's mostly for roughage. I'm not eating it for nutrients or for optimal nutrition by any means. I'm with you. I think we can agree completely on all of that. Well, before I let you go, I have one question for you. Since you mentioned that you ate paleo and then you ate keto and then you ate more animal based, I think that most folks are so hung up on the carnivore movement and they barely understand keto and they probably, many have never even dove into paleo. It's almost like old school, that people have
Yeah,
forgotten about it.
yeah.
What are the biggest differences between those three diets?
Well, paleo includes apart from meat, fish, eggs, it includes all kinds of nuts and almonds, seeds, but paleo does not include dairy, for example. So, when you take dairy into paleo, it's called primal, I think,
Right.
right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're
Uh,
right. Yeah,
yeah.
it's all been morphed into different. It depends on the guru.
I think I've heard that it's called primal if
Yeah,
you include dairy. So, and then keto is just that no carbs, no carbs at all. So you can combine paleo and keto, but then you take out everything that is carbs. So basically it's meat and fish and seafood and eggs and all kinds of butter. The thing is that you can be keto and still not be animal based, but that's horrible because then you
right.
include all kinds of margarine and seed oils and which I don't think it's is healthy at all. So keto is when you burn fat. And fat is your only fuel, energy, what do you call it? Source of energy.
Hmm.
That is keto. And I did that for a couple of years or maybe like one year or something. And I felt that my body was not 100%. So I went back to what I do now, which is animal based. Animal based, which I said before, so meat, fish, seafood, raw dairy, eggs, and honey. Basically, it's what Paul Saladino does with his carnivore code. And
Right.
to be honest, I think that's to me at least, my body thrives on that animal-based food.
It's a great tool and I do love it. I go in and out of it. I can't stay there for too. I start to look kind of aged if I'm getting too, especially keto. If I get too much fat and saturated fat in particular, I'll tell you offline because we don't have to go into it here because for sake of time, but
Yeah.
you got to
Yeah.
read Joel's books because he's got a pretty compelling
Yeah.
argument why a lot of saturated fat can induce insulin resistance. I think that's what was happening to me. And I started gaining weight and it was that menopause shift, that was that perimenopause. And I started gaining weight and I was like, what the heck? And I think it was the saturated fat. So my husband's
Okay.
very sad because I'm like, we have to try some other meats in here, babe. It can't be all red meat all the time. And he's like, but we don't eat chicken because chicken's like slimy little dinosaurs and they're gross and they're full of salmonella.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm sort of at an impasse. I'm trying to figure it out.
And it's very hard to get chicken of good quality, at least
Yes.
but I suppose in the US as well.
Oh,
They're not raised in a nice way. and they grow way too fast. The chickens today, they're not even 2 weeks when they're slaughtered. So we don't eat chicken either.
No, it's disgusting. I drove past a giant semi truck the other day that was all chicken cages, and they were only about, gosh, 12 inches tall. And all the chickens they can't stand up. They're all on their sides or on their
Yeah,
stomach. They all look dead. All their feathers were falling out. It was
yeah. No, it's
horrifying.
horrible. It's
Oh,
horrible.
it's disgusting. And they're so full of just pathologic organisms that we don't want. So I'm trying to sort it out. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I've been a pretty heavy beef and I do love beef. And I'm trying to sort out what that looks like for me. Maybe some fish. Maybe it's time for some fish in my life.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, fish is I love fish, but there are problems, with fish,
yes.
microplastics and all kinds of heavy metals, and it's not easy to find fish today. That is actually, I had another guy on my podcast, Paul Moreno, and he told me about well, basically the healthiest fish you can have are sardines and mackerel,
Yeah.
small fish that are like in the pyramid, they're down here,
Yep.
so the bigger the fish, the more toxins accumulate, and I mean it makes sense. So actually in Spain it's really easy to get good fish, that are healthy, good fish.
Oh, good. Yeah, I think it depends on where you live. I'm on the West Coast here, so we've got all the Fukushima fish from that fallout and people.
Really? Is it do you have the radioactivity? Is that a problem?
Well, people don't think it is, but there's no way that much nuclear waste got dumped into our ocean for that long without our fish all being impacted. I'll tell you a story that's horrifying. My background was in my undergrad. I spent a lot of time studying marine biology. I was obsessed with
Really?
whales and
Yeah,
orcas and sea lions and like all marine mammals.
yeah,
And I, more than once, we would have an animal just end up dead on the shore. And depending on which part of the shoreline it was, the college, whatever college could lay claim to that one. So we would get, whatever animals came up on this part of the shoreline. And multiple times, the dolphins and the orcas had crazy sky high levels of mercury. And so my professors concluded that they must have died of these were like baby orcas that were, just a few days old. And then the heavy metal situation started, the mercury situation became very dire up in the Puget Sound area up near Washington, where there's several resident pods of orcas. And so that was in the 90s. That was in like the early to mid 90s. And then I went to work for my mentor in 1994 or not 1995, my naturopathic mentor, the guy who got me into all of this. And he was treating patients with heavy metal toxicity and he was doing chelation therapy, intravenous chelation therapy way back in the 90s. Brilliant guy. And I realized then, like, oh my gosh, the humans are impacted by heavy metals. The big whales are the big meat eating whales are impacted by heavy metals.
yeah,
Obviously, the resident orcas predominantly eat salmon. It's
yeah,
the transient orcas that travel all over the globe. They eat other marine mammals. So that means the salmon are full of mercury if the
yeah,
orcas are dying of mercury. And this is back in the 1990s. And I was like, oh shit,
yeah,
I quit eating fish. Like that was,
yeah.
if I eat some now, it's a little bit, but that was it. And then the microplastics, like you mentioned, that is for real. And
Yeah.
then Fukushima went off, and we've been getting, I mean, they still haven't cleaned all that up. That's still pouring out, I believe. I don't think it ever got stopped. So
I thought that was too far from where you are to affect you, but it's
not with the way the currents are. No,
really okay.
no, it just comes right through where Hawaii is and down.
Really?
So I don't know. I'm a little scared of fish.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
that's
No,
my
no, no.
story.
So we eat fish, I would say once a week in my family. And maybe that's too much. I don't know. Maybe it's too much, but also I like the variety and not having I love grass-fed beef, but you can't have it every day because then you,
Right.
you get bored.
Yes, absolutely. That's where I'm at. I'm stuck in this cycle where I'm like, I got to introduce some other animal
Yeah,
protein in. So I was
yeah,
happy to talk to you because I know you're such a good cook. I was like, I'm going to pick his brain on this.
yeah.
How do you feel about shellfish?
I love shellfish,
Yeah.
oysters, and lobsters, and it's amazing. But also, there are microplastics and heavy metals, and yeah. So I try not to eat it too often, but I love it.
Yeah, that's my problem is they're filter feeders. So they're eating literally what's at the bottom of the
Exactly.
ocean. And my mentor always said that they had some internal mechanism to filter out all that stuff and that they were actually your best choice of seafood. But I have also learned what you have, which is eat the little tiny fish, the anchovies and the little sardines and the little guys that haven't bioaccumulated much. So,
Exactly.
oh, I did learn something interesting though. Oh, and I don't have this right in my head, but I was fascinated by it. It's not mercury that's the problem. It's methyl mercury. It's the way that mercury changes into methyl mercury. That's the problem. The methyl
Okay.
mercury is what is toxic to us. And I believe I, where did I hear this? I heard a scientist, I think on Instagram talking about it. And he said that I believe it was fish, like just any fish they've just realized that they have some internal mechanism to offset the methyl mercury conversion.
I didn't know that.
So
Okay.
it might not be as bad as we think. I don't have the whole story straight, so I don't want to speak on authority, but they might not be as bad as we think they are. Yeah, you don't want the methyl mercury. That's
Mm.
that's the version that's bad, but supposedly these fish have some kind of mechanism to protect themselves from that conversion. So maybe eating them isn't the worst. Although
Int-
if you look at Japan, Japan eats whale meat and dolphin meat, and so does Finland. Well, so does Norway. So do a lot of those Scandinavian countries.
Yeah,
There's a lot
Iceland,
of
Finland, all those they love.
there's a lot of there's a lot of mercury poisoning in Finland. There's a ton of it in Japan because they're eating these big bioaccumulating marine mammals
Yeah.
who are very full of mercury. So anyway, that's
Yeah,
another
I mean,
conversation, but
when you go to a Japanese restaurant, I realized what you should avoid are basically tuna fish and swordfish, because those
mhm.
are the ones with most toxins. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's only mercury, but toxins in general.
No, you're right. The
Because
big
they're
fish.
eating fish that eat fish that eat fish, so it's like it accumulates.
Indeed. Absolutely. I know it's crazy. What a world we live in. We can only do the best we can do, though, right? So I try not to think about it too much because we got to live, we got to love, we got to have good food. And I think as long rotation, just keep rotating through things. And I
Right,
think that's the ticket. Well,
right.
I know it's late where you are. You're in Spain, and I know it's late at night, so I want to let you go. But it was so fun to have you on the show today.
It was so fun. It's a pleasure always talking to you, Tina.
You
And
as
I must
well.
say that I love your Instagram. Yeah, I think you do so much good for this world.
Thank you. Thank you.
And,
I
and
feel
and when I had you on my podcast, people were writing to me before I launched the episode and saying, "Wait, when are you going to launch your Dr. Tina? She's amazing. I know that you have so many fans and followers and people that love you. So keep doing what you're doing."
Thank you. Thank you. So I appreciate that. I try. I'm trying to put good into the world. So, but you have a great podcast that, like you just mentioned, I was on. Can you tell everyone where to find your podcast, your Instagram, your YouTube, everything? What's the best
Okay.
place to start?
Yeah, so I'm most active on my Instagram, where I post almost every day, and but I also post on Twitter, X, I post on YouTube, and then I have my podcast. So it's called Hunger for Change. So far I've been doing one episode per month, but actually very soon I will start doing a couple of episodes per month. Every 14 days. So because I do feel and hear and that people like when I interview people like you, that are experts that know much more than I do. And I also learn so much myself, interviewing these people,
Well,
interview you guys.
it's
Yeah.
a great podcast and you have really fascinating guests on. So and you do such a great job of interviewing. You ask these really great sort of rapid fire questions and you get the information out of them quickly. So it's a good thing for folks to listen to because you keep it succinct. And
Thank you so much. Also, it's, since English is not my mother tongue, it's kind of a barrier. I need to get out of that comfort zone. But I've been so lucky to have all you amazing guests. So I'm gonna step up a bit, and I'm gonna do it twice a month.
oh, good. Well, I have so many people I can send your way that could be on your show. I'll
I
hook
would
you
love
up.
to. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Dr. Tina Show today. And I'm so glad to call you a friend. And I appreciate the work you're doing in the world as well. So thanks for being
A
here.
pleasure, a pleasure. And you're invited to I'm gonna make some nice grass-fed liver bread and when you come to Madrid.
Okay, I'll do it. I hope so.
You're gonna like it. I'm
Awesome.
sure.
Thanks for
I'm
coming
confident.
on.